I heard if you get it. No, I have.
You're not allowed to talk.
I have bosses.
Nice to see you. Yes, you have to start working. So, yeah, that's hey, hey. What's that? I've got the corner.
Got your corner office today, huh? Got your corner office today.
Yes. Remind me to tell you when I was working with Japanese companies what that means. It's not the same as here.
No, it's not.
It's not a good thing.
Yeah, no, not at all. You're the donkey.
It basically means you're put out to pasture.
Yes, you are the donkey.
Okay, what is our password? Train.
It's on your computer.
No.
Oh, it is? Oh,
It should be.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. We probably shouldn't be broadcasting it over the live stream.
No.
Just imagine when somebody opened
Oh, the captions, that's so nice.
or guns. Okay.
You're here.
I'm a grandma.
Congrats.
Thank you.
You never did send me the pictures.
Oh, gosh. I got a million of them.
You're
I
running?
ran, yeah.
Get your breath.
I know.
Take the mask off for a few minutes. You can breathe.
Because I have
Yeah, don't get in and have them induce masks.
It's already preserved. It's a historic site. They're working with it. He wants to have a barn for all the vehicles. And, he has like 20 cars. They're all his stuff.
Everybody ready? You ready, Beth? Okay. I'd like to call to order the November 9th, 2020 Apex Planning Board meeting agenda. At this time, would you bow your heads for the invocation, please? Father, we come to you at this time asking for your blessing and help as we are gathered together. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand and ask that you would clearly show us how to conduct our work with a spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Help us come up with effective strategies that can help enable us to move forward as a team in a meaningful way. And we ask all these blessings in your name as we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Diane, do we have any items of information?
Yes, we do, and I did send this to your email addresses, so you don't have to take notes, because I actually had a few things to tell you about. First of all, an affordable housing plan update. The town council will receive an update on the plan at their December 1st meeting, and so you all are encouraged to watch that via live stream on YouTube. Then we will have a public presentation of the draft plan on December 17th. That online location is to be determined, but we'll be sure you are aware of where that is if you would like to attend virtually.
Is that the December 1st council meeting or the 8th?
December the 1st is the town council meeting. And December 17th is the public presentation. It's in your email for the Apex email address, so it's there if you need to check. And then the plan is for the public hearings on the plan to be held before planning board and council in January. And just as an update, the town council did move their meetings to the 2nd and 4th Tuesday starting in January, so that date will be January 26th for the town council. And then I wanted to let you know that this upcoming meeting on November 17th at 6 p.m., we encourage you to watch the town's YouTube live stream again for the presentation of the Marvin Collins Small Area Plan Award from the North Carolina chapter of the American Planning Association to the town of Apex for the downtown master plan and parking study. So I wanted to let you know about that too.
Yay.
Thanks.
Yes.
Good deal.
Good job. I just want to make sure everybody especially we have a couple new members. I've been attending the affordable housing working groups as a representative of us. So if any of you have any questions as we come towards this stage, just shout out, give me an email, call me, whatever you want.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Okay, public comment. So this is a public comment for the public to speak on any items that do not appear in the agenda under public hearings. Any members of the public wishing to comment on public hearing items will be called at the appropriate time. So do we have anybody that wants to speak? Looks like Mr. Roach is coming up. Please limit it to 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, Jeff Roach, 905 Newington Way here in Apex. I'm here tonight on this matter just as a citizen, not as an engineer, as I'll be later in the conversation. My question tonight is regarding new business item number 2, which is one of the UDO amendments specifically related to the cross-access agreement requirement between adjacent property owners. I'll start by saying I appreciate what staff is doing. We've had a number of projects that have come in like this where we have dedicated easements, but I will tell you that I don't know if this is a solution, and I don't have the solution. So I'll start by saying that. I'm just giving you my questions or concerns. The town is trying to dictate a cross-access agreement between 2 adjacent property owners where one could go in, which is a daycare, and another could go in next door, which could be some, high turnover restaurant or fast food restaurant. And the concern being is you have 2 private property owners that are being forced to have a cross-access agreement. One guy may tear up the asphalt on the other guys, and there's no agreement to maintain that. The town can't force them to have a common area maintenance agreement plan, so I'm concerned that we're putting 2 private citizens that may hate each other having to come to an agreement and sit down at a table and shake hands. So that's first concern. Second thing is it requires a cross-access agreement, which would limit property access for just an individual property to gain access to the adjacent property or to the street in front of them, which is a thoroughfare, which right now, technically by right, they have the ability to go forward. I know that dealing with Russell and Shannon and everybody and Diane on planning and site planning issues, it's not always the case that the best way to do it is usually to the adjacent properties. But again, you're trying to get 2 private individual property owners to come to an agreement that they may disagree on it. So the other big concern is that the ordinance is very clear, or the language in the ordinance is very clear about setting the minimum spacing for 250 feet for right in, right out, 500 feet for minor thoroughfares, and 1,000 feet on thoroughfares. By putting that dimension in there as stated, there is no wiggle room for staff, whether it's Diane or anybody else. My understanding, I may be wrong, and I know Diane will clarify it when she gets up under new business item number 2, but once it's in the ordinance, it makes it very difficult for somebody to make a discussion to say, I would like to be at 450 feet for an access to a minor collector. By putting that in there, it just kind of hamstrings us as the development community and makes it harder for staff, or there's one more step that we have to go through with staff. So that's just my concerns. I appreciate you guys listening, and I will stick around to see how the conversation goes later. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Anybody else wish to come to talk about any non-public hearing events? Okay. Seeing none, there are no consent. The October 12th meeting minutes will be included in the December agenda, and we'll vote on them at that point. So we will move to public hearing number 1. Shelley is presenting the possible motion regarding the rezoning 20 CZ07, the Holman Hills site.
Good evening, everybody. Holloman Hills South is located on the southwestern kind of corner of the town's jurisdiction, way down here, next to the water reclamation facility. It is, as it's called, south of Holloman Hills. It consists of 2 parcels totaling about 10.16 acres. As you can see, they're mostly wooded with some cleared areas involved. It's located at the end of Church Road, right here, and west of New Hill Holloman Road between US 1, sorry, I always get these backwards, US 1 down here and Old 1 up at the north. It's south of Holloman Hills subdivision, which was approved in March 2018 and is now under construction. The parcels are currently zoned Wake County R30, and the applicant is proposing to rezone them to medium-density conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map does designate this as medium-density residential, so the proposed zoning district is consistent with the 2045 land use map. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on October 19th, 2020. That meeting report is attached to your staff report. The applicant is also proposing a few uses. These are generally consistent with the zoning district, with the zoning conditions and uses to Holloman Hills to the north. The uses are single family, park active, park passive, greenway, utility minor, accessory apartment, family care home, and recreation facility private. There are a couple of conditions specifically related to buffering. If this subdivision is developed as a part of the approved Holloman Hills subdivision, then no buffer shall be provided along the northern property line here between the 2 subdivisions. A 20-foot type B buffer will be provided along the eastern boundary adjacent to the 2 parcels right here that are currently residential. The remaining length of the eastern boundary, there we go, shall be a 10-foot type B buffer. And then a 10-foot type B buffer shall be provided to the south adjacent to where the Western Wake Regional Water Reclamation Facility wraps around. So those are our 3 buffer conditions that the applicants provided. The architectural conditions are listed just below on page 2 of your staff report. Those are consistent with the conditions that were provided for the development to the north. With one exception, we added that homes will be pre-wired for solar panels in this as well. Planning staff recommends approval of this rezoning as provided if the following condition is added. A 100-foot riparian buffer shall be provided for all perennial streams in accordance with the requirements of the UDO section 6.1 as of August 3rd, 2020. You may ask me, why would you ask for this condition? In February 2022, the town's NPDES Phase 2 permit will expire. That's the one where we can add these additional restrictions on to make it a 100-foot stream buffer instead of a 50-foot for perennial streams. Unless it's renewed, and we don't have any guarantee of that at this point, unless it's renewed, our ability to enforce that 100-foot riparian buffer basically goes away. And that's only for the Big Branch and Middle Creek basins, but this is within those basins. To mitigate this, we're asking for a zoning condition for any rezoning inside of those 2 basins that will, to make sure that we have that 100-foot buffer on our perennial streams. Otherwise, an amended subdivision could come through, or a site plan could be submitted after February 2022 that reduces that buffer to 50 feet, and we wouldn't have any way to prevent that. Given the concerns of our residents and our council members, we feel like this is the best option that we have for this, especially considering the tree preservation concerns and the other environmental preservation concerns. The zoning condition is our best tool. To that end, both planning and our water resources staff are requesting that this riparian buffer condition be added to all residential zoning petitions in those 2 basins. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Shelley,
Yes, sir.
is the dark line that runs along north and south on the left side of the property, is that the creek that you're talking about, the stream?
It's pretty close. It's actually a sewer line. Sewer lines for gravity lines are typically in the lowest section of the property, topography-wise. So that's a pretty good eyeball indicator of it. It's mostly to the west of that.
Is 100 foot gonna really kind of whack out what they can develop through here or not?
Especially, there's only a small section of this property that has a 100-foot buffer on it. This section up here is potentially a 100-foot buffer. You can kind of see up here in Holloman Hills, all this green area is a 100-foot buffer.
Got it.
The creek kind of goes like
see
this.
I see it now, okay. I got it. So
there's only a small
so it's not
section.
gonna take a big chunk out of it? Okay.
There's only a small section of this that would be the 100-foot buffer. The rest of it is 50-foot because it becomes an intermittent stream
Got it.
at a certain portion.
Shelley, I got a question.
Sure.
Your current UDO stipulates that perennial streams have a 100-foot buffer currently?
Right.
Okay.
What's the UDO for the buffers on, usually you put the chart that's whether they meet the, so on, for each of these buffers?
You're right, and I didn't actually include that in this one, and I apologize for that. I'll make sure town council gets a copy of that. If I remember correctly, this is supposed to be a 10-foot type B buffer would be what's required between the two developments based on the UDO. It would also be, I think, a 10-foot type B here, no, a 20-foot type B between these two parcels, and then I think it's normally a 30 or a 40-foot buffer along through here. Part of the reason that we're not objecting to it in this area, this is whoops, I keep thinking it's the actual map and I can click on it. This is Duke Electric land. Now it's Duke Energy land that they have, that through the grapevine people have discussed possibly purchasing and redeveloping, but it's Duke, so anything along those lines will take quite a while. This is the Western Wake Water Reclamation Facility, and it was negotiated when this was built that there be an extra wide buffer on that property. So part of the reason why we're not worried about a narrower buffer here to the south is because that property already has an extra wide buffer.
And that's why there's no buffer for the western boundary?
Well, the western boundary's got a stream, so it's got at least a 50-foot buffer in there. So that's going to be basically where you see the sewer easement is kind of the edge of the stream buffer. So it's already got a nice big chunk preserved.
In conversations with the applicant, were they, was the discussion of the 100-foot buffer part of your conversations with them?
We did discuss it with them. We made it clear from the beginning that we were going to phrase our staff report this way. They declined to add it at that time. They said that they'd rather wait until planning board and town council to see how things were going, and that they were uncomfortable potentially adding a condition that could reduce the amount of developable land for the client. So I'll let Mr. Roach address those comments for you.
Any other questions for Shelley? Okay, thanks, Shelley.
You're welcome.
Yep, I'd like to make a statement.
Jeff Roach, this time with Peak Engineering and Design. I apologize. Alonzo Wilson is supposed to be here. He is the applicant, and Alonzo actually did the rezoning for Holloman Hills north of us. He's actually taken a couple other smaller pieces that have been added into Holloman Hills. I kind of wish he was here just so you guys could see the face of the person that's actually doing this work to get him in here. But I will touch on a few points. I'm going to leave the big question in the room, which is the 100-foot stream buffer, to the end. I'll touch on a couple real quick, if that's okay with you guys. Start off, thank you, staff. It's been great working with Shelley as usual, going back and forth. We don't always agree on things, but at least we can figure out at the end of the day, hey, okay, here's what we're going to ask for. First of all, it does meet the 2045 land use. It's in compliance, medium density residential. Somebody had asked a question about the maximum density being 6 units an acre. medium density is, 3 to 6 units an acre typically. It can go up to 6 units. We're probably going to be somewhere in the range of about 3. That's what Holloman Hills is about 3 units an acre. We anticipate ours being somewhere in that, maybe a hair above or hair below, just kind of depends on the final design. And the 100-foot stream buffer, how it impacts the site. As part of the agreement, and part of the reason this project is coming up for zoning is this is part of the town's future annexation. I think there's agreements for this area when the Western Wake Reclamation Facility was built. The sewer and the water were extended out there, so these properties, or some of these properties out here, are required to annex by like 2025. So it's kind of forcing development. Holloman Hills was that way. I think some properties north of it have already connected. So you'll see more and more annexation, more and more zonings out this way as well. This is just the next one. It's a reasonable extension south of Holloman Hills, and it's got Church Road stubbed right into it. So it's going to be a straight extension into the property. Shelley went all through the perimeter buffers. Mr. Marks, to answer your question about the buffer on the west side, we don't specify what the buffers are unless they are different than what the ordinance requires. So that's why the northern boundary being a 10-foot buffer with the option to eliminate it if it becomes it's the same development. If the same people are developing both of them, it can be eliminated. To the east, we've got 2 different buffers that are labeled because they are different than what the ordinance requires. That's the only reason you see these listed out here. We worked back and forth with Shelley on the southern one up against the town's property. On the west, there still will be a buffer required, but it's going to be within that 100-foot buffer, 50-foot stream buffer, whatever buffer is set aside for that creek that runs, and I don't know if I get to wash all this down when I'm done now. The creek is somewhere in this area west of the stream, as Shelley pointed out, west of the sewer, as Shelley pointed out. So that stream buffer is going to be in this general area. It's going to encompass a lot of the sewer line. We've designed around either a 50 or 100-foot buffer, and about halfway down, 3/4 of the way, somewhere in this area is where we anticipate it could likely jump up to the 100-foot perennial stream requirement. But that's still in the design side. At this point, we're still in zoning and sketch plans. So to jump into the big monkey in the room here, the white elephant in the room is the buffer that the staff is asking for. It's our opinion that it's not so much that we're fighting the 100-foot buffer. If it's a perennial stream and we come in 3 months or 6 months, it's a perennial stream, it's got a 100-foot buffer on it. If Apex sees their NPDES permit expiring in February of 2022, my anticipation is that stormwater staff will be in front of you guys asking for you to make an amendment to allow something like a urban transition zone or a tree canopy zone. And what will happen is that will take a typical 50-foot buffer and it will add another 50 feet on the outside for any perennial streams, and they will call it something other than a buffer. It'll be a canopy zone, it'll be an urban transition, name it what you want. But there will be a language in the ordinance that will require us to protect a 100-foot swath of land on either side of that stream if it's perennial. I don't want to set a precedence today by saying, yes, we agree to it, but I will tell you that as of right now, the plan is to get the zoning approved and go immediately to site plans, master subdivision plan, which means that we will be submitting a 100-foot buffer per the current ordinance. My role as an engineer is to follow the ordinance. I don't want to add 50 different conditions. I don't like these buffer conditions, but to make the site work, we had to ask for them. If it were up to me, there'd be 2 conditions, and that would be limiting the uses and then limiting the density for every project, simply because it's harder for me as an engineer to keep track of those zoning conditions and why did Joe down the street agree to this zoning condition? This is weird. I don't like dealing with those, so I try to keep it as simple as possible, and I try to reference the ordinance as much as possible, because that's what everybody's designing to. That's what people are buying to. And when somebody goes to buy it and they see this weird zoning condition, you will follow the ordinance based upon the, August 2020 standard of section 6.1. It raises red flags with the buyer. Why is that called out specifically as a different condition? Why aren't you just following the ordinance? So my goal is to simply follow the ordinance. You guys set the rules, planning staff, stormwater, whoever just sets the rules, I follow those rules. If I can't make something work, I work with staff. If I can't make it work, I go back and I redesign. I would like to not have a condition on this site that requires that, because I think that the 100-foot buffer will be enforced either way, whether through an ordinance amendment or the NPDES permit gets approved, or we come to a master subdivision sooner. So along those lines, I think the site really fits out here. This is the right place for it. It's going to get annexed. There's already water and sewer to the area. It's tying right into Holloman Hills South. It will have a connection. Holloman Hills has a street stub to the property generally in this area, as well as a stub from Church Road. It is the right place for the single-family residential product out here, and we've limited through the uses for that use. So make sure I didn't forget anything here. Last point, section 6.1 of the ordinance is about 65 pages long. So I think that also staff's request to follow section 6.1 related to the buffers is overly reaching. And what could happen is if that gets enacted, I would then have to go back to 6.1 and look at everything in 6.1 and go back to 2020 if I'm developing this in 2025 or if somebody's building it in 2025. What were the rules then? And I've got to look at all of 6.1. In the last 5 years, there's been 23 UDO amendments to section 6.1. So it's not like this section hasn't been touched before. It will be touched again if the NPDES permit comes out and changes. The ordinance is the best way to control the buffers. The ordinance is the best way for me to design with no questions asked. I'm not having to fight with staff. I'm not having to argue with the Corps or anybody else. So I would appreciate a little bit of latitude. Moving forward with that, we are going to do what's right. Mr. Steele, you asked about the impact of the 100-foot buffer. We've designed around it. We already know what's there. Not to get too far into the weeds, this is a secondary watershed area. So what would happen is the 100-foot buffer is typically, it's actually a 200-foot buffer if you want to think of it that way. What happens is that buffer is allowed to slide left and right because it's in the secondary watershed. We're dedicating, this area here is actually outside of that 100-foot buffer. That stream buffer will actually slide a little bit left and right where it makes sense to do additional tree canopy or preservation versus just following the perennial stream or following the intermittent stream. So we're working with that area more than just saying there's a creek, it's got a 100-foot buffer on it. So it's a little bit of flexibility in design that the ordinance allows us to have. Again, I'm following the ordinance, I'm providing additional tree preservation as possible. So with that, I will stop. I've talked way too much, and I will just answer any questions that you guys have. And like I said, I wish Alonzo was here just to put a face with a project, and that way you guys can see who's applying for this. So I do appreciate your time and be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Roach?
I have a few. Real quick, Mr. Roach, thank you for being very thorough on the stream buffer regulation. Are you going to be mass grading? Do you know?
We are. Due to the size of the lots, they're too small.
Right. And so under the current UDO provision, that's 25% plus 2?
It's 30% plus 5.
Oh, wow. So over a third of that site has to be tree preservation?
That's correct.
So regardless of whether it's 100-foot or 50-foot, are you able to achieve that?
We are. We've got a number of buffers around the east and the south, and then, of course, that big lug that's from the sewer line west, whether it's a perennial stream, intermittent stream, that's where our stormwater will be as well. And then tree preservation, that'll get us there. So, and that's a recent change in the ordinance to go to the 30 and 5 for mass grading.
If the scenario were to exist where the buffers went down to 50 feet and it wasn't able to be 100 foot any longer, would that benefit even having 35% tree preservation on the site? Would you be able to utilize more of the land?
It would not result in any more lots, in our opinion. Because that sewer line kind of restricts the location of the lots anyway. So I think the RCA preservation is what it is, whether it's within a 100-foot buffer or whether it's in a 50-foot buffer. So it's not going to really change the tree canopy or coverage or RCA numbers really that much.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Ryan. Any questions for Mr. Roach? Thanks.
I appreciate your time, guys.
Anybody from the public wishes to make a comment, which I don't see anybody out there, so I assume we'll bring it back to the board for discussion and possible motion. Any comments?
I'm not short on words right now, so I guess I'll go first. Thank you. I think this is very much in keeping with Holman Hills. Staff did an excellent job, and this is in keeping with their report. So I don't see any need to add after hearing the 35%, over a third of the site is being preserved for trees. I think that's in keeping with what council envisions, and it's meeting the current ordinance. I don't see the need to be overly prescriptive with additional requirements, and I'm favorable on this.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I think that's the real question, whether we want to add the condition or just leave it off, because I think it's going to be accommodated anyway, so.
Well, I've always been in favor of less regulation because we do have so many. So I'll throw that out for what it's worth.
Okay. Any other comments?
I guess maybe I should have asked the question earlier. So you have the ability to go up to 6 per acre, is that correct? With what you are asking for, does rezoning would allow you to go up to 6?
That's correct, per the medium density zoning district, that's correct.
So would you be willing to do some type of condition where we go, 3 plus or minus half to go ahead and guarantee that there wouldn't be any more lots than?
Honestly, the medium density, we're never going to achieve 6 with single-family residential on this site or any others, especially with when you start adding 35% RCA, you're talking about probably like 2,000 square foot lots.
Too small. Okay.
Yeah, so in this area, the medium density standards are going to kick in for minimum lot widths and setback requirements. So there's no way to achieve 6 units an acre. Could we get to 3.5 or 4? Maybe, but that's pushing it. Holloman Hills is 2.96 in their last approved plans, and I truly believe that's about where we'll be.
Okay.
And I actually think, and just so you guys know, don't hold me to this, but we're currently at I think we're at 25 lots on 10 acres. What's that, 2.5? If my math is correct, is that, somebody check me there. So
that answers the bigger question. There's not, if you don't have this, you really can't use the land for much anyways.
No, because the sewer line kind of sets that western boundary for us. We can put the back of the lots in it, but you don't want people driving over the sewer line, and once they get past the sewer line, they're in the creek. So either way, you're stopping, the back of the house is going to stop on the eastern side of the sewer. The back of your house is going to be no farther west than this area right here. So that would be the only place to pick up land. You can't go farther south, you can't go east, you can't go north, because you're tied in with all the other projects around you. And unless a town or Sean wants to sell some of the land from the water reclamation facility, I don't see it happening. So.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other discussion or possible motion?
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve rezoning case 20 CZ09 based on the staff report and all the conditions thereon.
Okay, so you want to include the 100-foot?
Except for that.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't realize that. I thought that had to be added. Was that added? Sorry.
Well, that's
So you'd like to recommend approval as proposed by the applicant?
applicant.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you for the terminology. I have a motion to approve.
I'll second.
And a second by Beth. Any other comments before we vote? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Item number 2, Jenna is going to discuss the motion regarding amendments to the bicycle and pedestrian plan map.
Yeah, public hearing number 2. So first, just to provide some context, we're looking at the area around Depot 499 rezoning, so along South Salem Street, west of the intersection with the Apex Peakway. And there are 3 amendments to the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map associated with this that I'll be presenting. The first is, the intent of these is to be consistent with the approved Depot 499 rezoning. And the first is to add side path along the west side of South Salem Street from Apex Barbecue Road down to the NC 540 interchange. And the second condition came from town council during the rezoning case, and that's to add a proposed pedestrian crossing of South Salem Street and the railroad tracks from Depot 499 to the east side of the railroad tracks. And then the third is what staff added, so this proposed greenway from the pedestrian crossing to the future intersection of future James Street and future Padstone Drive, so that we can complete the connection from that pedestrian crossing to a roadway. So this map is included to take a closer look at the location of the proposed pedestrian crossing. So it's shown here with the black star. And these two pods, in orange, pods I and pods J, are proposed as multifamily residential. And pod S in blue to the south is a proposed school. And I'm going to reference the condition that was included in the PUD. So at the time, as far as the location of the proposed pedestrian crossing, so it notes that at the time of major site plan for any development in pods I and J, the developer agrees to dedicate an area along the South Salem Street frontage to serve as a connection point for a future pedestrian crossing of South Salem Street and the railroad. So just to point out why we placed it right here at the southern end of pod J, and also because we anticipate that this area will have high pedestrian volumes, and this would provide a safe route to school, to that future school in pod S. So just going back to this slide, and then note that these amendments were reviewed with Public Works and Transportation, as well as Police, Fire, EMS, and Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources, and no concerns were expressed during that meeting. And these amendments were also reviewed with a representative of the Depot 499 development, and he noted that this is consistent with the intent of the PUD, and planning staff recommends approval of these amendments. Do you all have any questions?
Any questions for Jenna on this bicycle?
I have a question. Is the proposed pedestrian crossing, is there going to be any caution lights or anything there for the, I assume there will be kids crossing there, I would assume?
Well, we have, right now it's just at like the plan level, so it's just conceptual, so I imagine that there would be some sort of feasibility study to really look into the details of what that would look like.
Is it at grade? Grade separated?
It'll be grade separated.
Grade separated.
Yeah. The map shows it as grade separated, but then the detail down below doesn't mention that. So is it going to be grade separated?
Yes, it would be yeah, in the legend it would say that a grade separated bike path crossing.
So it'd be a bridge of some sort.
Yeah, it's like think of it like a bridge or a pedestrian bridge. Yeah. Yeah.
I did have a question on that. Just to be clear, when the gentleman who owns that property were to develop it or redevelop it, rezone it, would they be required to construct that infrastructure to cross the rail, or only to accommodate up to their property line, up to the CSX railway right away?
You're saying on the east side of the railway?
Yeah, the south and the east side.
The condition just noted that it would need to be constructed by others. And do you think that would be I imagine that would be a town project, but.
Yes, so it would be consistent with every other plan that comes in. What's shown on our adopted plan, we ask for the right-of-way to provide for future facilities. And then anything on the frontage is typically required to be built, although our requirements have to be consistent with what the actual plan is for. I'm just gonna. So just like with Depot 499, I would not anticipate that a project on the east side would be required to build a crossing like this. It's most likely that they would have to provide for space so that it could be built by others. More of a public project, given the expense of this type of a crossing.
Any other questions for Jenna? Thank you, Jenna. Anybody from the public wish to come speak about this amendment? All right. Since there's nobody out there, I'll bring it back to the board for any discussion or possible motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve as written.
Okay, I have a motion from Reggie. Do I have a
A
second? Second from Mark. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next up, item number 3, Shannon is going to present a public hearing and possible motion regarding the amendment to the thoroughfare and collector street plan map that we...
Okay, so there are numerous amendments that I'll present to you tonight to the thoroughfare and collector street plan map. These are mostly a result of our quality review of the GIS data from Advanced Apex. And so you may recall, or some of you may recall, we went through a similar process for our bicycle pedestrian system plan map. We've now done that for the thoroughfare and collector street plan map. Just for efficiency, I'll let you know right off the bat that we have reviewed these proposed amendments with Public Works and Transportation, Police, Fire, and EMS, and there were no concerns about any of the amendments. Also, planning staff are recommending support of all of these amendments. So I'll present these generally from west to east. They're also in this order in your staff report. So the first amendment is in the vicinity of Reagan Road and Hume Olive Road. This, the amendment is to show a future local connection, which would be a residential street, right here. So from this intersection over to Reagan Road. The adopted plan already shows this portion, so this was really just an omission that left that portion off. And I'll just pause for questions after each one, if that's okay.
That makes sense, yeah.
Shannon, that yellow line coming down the western side, is that 751?
This is New Hill Olive Chapel Road.
Okay.
So potentially future 751.
All right.
Okay. The next one. Similarly, this is a change to a future local connection. So here's New Hill Olive Chapel Road. We show a future local connection on this alignment. The proposed amendment is just a minor revision to use existing driveway and try to avoid impacts to that property. Just like the previous one, this would most likely occur as part of redevelopment, not a funded project. Any questions about this one? Okay, we're moving over to Apex Peakway. So this is the town's Apex Peakway Southwest Connector project. The first amendment on this page is to slightly shift the alignment of the future major collector street that would connect the Peakway in South Salem. This is to make sure that our plan matches the roadway design for this project. Also on this figure, we're recommending a slight shift to the future extension of James Street so that it better aligns with the stub at Flint Valley Lane. Any questions about either of these?
Sorry, I do.
You have a question, Ryan?
Yeah, I did, sorry. Shannon, it looks like the collector goes across a significant water body. If that's jurisdictional, does that play into the alignment and having to come back to do an amendment to this if they can't get that, whoever develops that site, if that alignment doesn't work?
Yes, I think if that was determined to be jurisdictional at the time of design, we would bring forward a potential amendment for this alignment. Although to meet our major collector street standards, it would be challenging to shift it to completely avoid that pond. So that would be considered at the time of design. And again, this is not, the extension of James Street is not a funded local or state project. It would most likely occur during development. The Apex Peakway project is funded with construction anticipated in 2021.
So this alignment would go where then?
It's just a little.
So right now, we are recommending it as shown with this green and white line.
Yeah, it's really hard to see.
Yeah,
They
it's-
just shifted it south, but just a
lines would
smidgen.
And that's why these kinds of quality review changes are occurring with the GIS data and not at our initial review.
More accurate.
Yep. Okay, so we were just looking over here, so shifting slightly southwest, try to make sure I get these in order. So the first amendment we're proposing here, and we brought this to you before as part of the Depot 499 package of amendments. Town Council supported the applicant's request for Depot 499, which did not include the change that we're suggesting here. This, we felt, really needed to be considered independently, so we just wanted to bring it forward for consideration again. So the proposed change is to designate what I'll call future James Street extension again, from this major collector over to Viridia Parkway, to upgrade that to a future major collector instead of a future minor collector. The main difference between the two is that residential driveways are not allowed on major collector streets. The second amendment shown here is to add a future local connection from Flint Valley Lane down to this major collector street. The purpose is to be transparent to the public that we're expecting that street to be extended and to make sure we're providing for future connectivity. Any questions on these two?
The upgrade from a future minor to a major, is that considered residential now?
So collector streets generally are intended to carry more traffic than residential streets.
Right.
So both minor and major are designed to a higher standard than a residential street. They both require 60 feet of right-of-way, but major collectors have no residential driveways. This street is not on the ground, so it doesn't affect an existing street. It's just, how we would build it in the future.
So Salem Street, as it stands now, would be a minor or a major collector?
Salem Street is a thoroughfare.
Thoroughfare, all right, totally different, okay.
Not totally different, but, just the different capacities that it carries and street spacing.
Ms. Max, I have a question right quick. Do you know what the future land use calls for in the quadrant, kind of where we're proposing the upgrade from minor to major?
I don't want to say without double checking. I don't know if Diane remembers offhand. Yeah. Yeah, I want to say that we had potentially office and commercial on this side of the roadway, and then residential densities on the east side, but I would need to double check the future land use map.
I
Okay.
was just wondering what facilitated the change from minor to major?
So mainly because this roadway connects two thoroughfares. So, it's expected to carry substantial volumes of traffic, and we would expect if residential driveways are directly connecting to that, we would be hearing from a lot of unhappy citizens.
So Amanda wrote to me, she's watching.
Oh, she is.
Needed high-density residential close to Salem Village.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah. And is it correct that, my recollection is the same as I think yours, that on the outer part of that collector towards both highways is mixed use or commercial? As you get closer to 540 and US 1, am I right?
We can phone a friend again.
Okay. Okay.
I thought they had these all memorized.
Yeah.
Trust, we can't pull up the Google on these laptops.
That's right. That's right.
It's always better to double check.
Ms. Cox, I was just, if that's medium or high-density residential, the highest and best use of that, I'd have trouble limiting the driveway provision, not so much because I think that we need the driveways, it's just limiting the use for whoever does develop that. Sometimes driveways can reduce traffic speeds. I know I see Russell over there, he's kind of shivering when I say that, but it's a true statement. I think it'd just be limiting whatever happens there. I don't know, that I could be swayed either way on that.
Well, is it residential driveways or is it like office building driveways that we're limiting?
Minor collectors, you can have residential, like your driveway you pull in to get to your house. Those driveways are allowed on minor collector streets. And we, actually, staff had a conversation about minor collector streets a week or so ago. They're difficult.
So her answer is the bottom almost, it's more than I thought it was. It's not just on the outer perimeter of that road, it cuts across that road is blue.
So it's office
All right.
industrial.
Office industrial.
So, yeah. I have my opinion is that we need this to be a major collector for one of the reasons is because we were not able to get the crossover, the flyover that we wanted over Salem Street. So we've sort of trapped all of the traffic inside this area where it could have gone out to Salem Street or across. So now we've got it all in there and it's got to get out. And so I think if we don't make it a major collector, I think we're going to just create future problems.
I agree.
I agree. I agree.
Okay, I'll just keep moving.
Are we going to approve these all as a package or individual motions?
We can discuss them individually.
Okay, all right. I think it's more effective to do them discuss them one at a time.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's more effective to vote 15 times, but.
What's that? Who owns it?
There will need to be a public hearing before any motion and voting. But if you have questions while I'm standing up here.
Good point.
I understand.
Okay. So now we're in the vicinity of Apex Barbecue Road. This is Apex Nature Park. Again, this is looking at just the alignment of one of our future local connections extending from Jerrymouth Drive. The recommendation is to revise the alignment to avoid steep slopes and plan for an intersection at Evans Road that's directly across from the Nature Park entrance. Questions? This is near 1010 Road. So the parcel that you're looking at here is Knights Play Golf. Our adopted plan already shows a major collector street crossing through Knights Play and connecting to future Production Drive. The change would slightly shift the alignment to make sure that Collector Street is planned on one parcel and to align it better with the Penny Road intersection at 1010 Road. Again, this is not a state or local funded project. It would most likely be part of future redevelopment if that should occur. Any questions on that one? This is US 1. We're just east of the interchange with 55, or north, I guess. Our adopted plan shows, already shows a grade separated crossing intended to connect Shiflin and Lufkin roads, but we don't have a street associated with that. So for clarity, if this should ever move forward, we wanted to identify what street type we would expect. So we're recommending adding a major collector street to the thoroughfare and collector street plan map. This project would likely not occur with development due to the expense. We would most likely try to have this become a state-funded project through the prioritization process. It's not programmed, however. Any questions? Okay, there are several on this figure. So the bottom of the screen is Sunset Lake Road. This is Stevenson Road here. So this large parcel is the future high school site. The first amendment is actually consistent with our previous plan, and it's to shift this future major collector street back north. This would connect Reunion Creek Parkway and Thriftwood Drive. This shift is consistent with preliminary plans we're reviewing for the school. Associated with that, we are recommending an adjustment to this minor collector street, shifting that west slightly just to tee into the major collector. That would avoid impacts to some of these backyards. This street will still be very challenging to build, and we expect it to be a long-range project. And then the final change here is to add a local connection between Marion Station Drive and Smith Road. And again, that's just planning for future connectivity. Any questions on these? Okay, so this page just summarizes and numbers the amendments in case you need to call out any specific amendments for questions, discussion, or motions. If there are any further questions, I can try to answer those.
Any questions for Shannon?
Is the first one, the connection to Reagan Road, does that lead into the new project that got approved last month across Hume Road?
The new project, the Stick Barn Lane, that leads into a project that's already under construction.
I think the one you're talking about is on the south side of Hume Olive, isn't it? Yeah. So is that in the same vicinity?
I think we have several projects on Hume Olive. I believe they're further east, but.
No, that one.
So the amendment does not touch that. The amendment.
No, I mean, is it, if you're realigning a street and you've got the development for 500 houses going in already, would it not make sense to make sure that those two align themselves at this point?
Let me go back to the figure so we can speak to it a little easier. So the only change that we're proposing today is just this piece of this local connection.
Oh, okay, okay.
I think that's what I was trying to clarify.
I do believe that south side connection right there at Hume Olive Road is in line with
Yeah.
that's just to the side of your farm.
Right, yeah. I'm thinking so.
Just right on the side.
Yeah.
And that is something that we look at when plans come forward, is future connectivity with the roadway network. So. Thank you.
Anybody from the public want to make a comment? If not, we'll bring it back to the board. So we can go through each of the amendments, and if we seem like we're all in agreement with them, then we can just vote as on all 11 or 12 actually. So we just knock them off. So anything on amendment number 1 that we want to discuss? Okay. I mean, we can go through all of them, or is there any, I guess there are any amendments that we have issues on that you want to review?
None for me.
Okay.
None for me.
So then we just need a motion to approve all, I get the right number, all 12 amendments as presented by Shannon.
I'll make a motion that we recommend approval for all of the amendments that are contained in Shannon's transportation plan amendments, thoroughfare and collector street plan.
Amendments 1 through 12. I have a motion from Mark. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Go ahead.
Okay, Reggie seconds.
Reggie, second.
Any discussions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Brings us to item number 4, which is Possible motion regarding the amendments to the thoroughfare and Collector Street, and this is two that we saw 2 months ago?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but I will go back through the description of these because I know we have some new members of the planning board since this was heard.
I printed out the meeting minutes so we can review our comments. Just so that-
Thank you.
Thank you.
So these will look familiar to many of you. In October, the planning board considered several amendments that were associated with recommendations from the regional Southwest area study led by the capital area
It was
MPO.
September, wasn't it?
Was it September? Yeah, and then October was the town council meeting. The town council also heard those amendments and voted to amend the thoroughfare and Collector Street plan map. But at their October 20th meeting, they asked staff to bring forward two of those for potential reconsideration, with the desire for additional public input, another public hearing, and just because these were complicated changes. So Russell Dalton is also here tonight to help answer any questions that may come up. So the Southwest area study recommendation on New Hill Olive Chapel Road was to upgrade our plan from a 2-lane rural thoroughfare to a 4-lane thoroughfare with median. And so what's presented tonight is the reversal of that amendment. So now we're considering downgrading New Hill Olive Chapel Road from a 4-lane with median to a 2-lane rural thoroughfare. Does that part make sense? Okay. So
None of them make sense.
the initial recommendation to upgrade this road came from the Southwest area study. And one of the reasons is that new traffic model projections were done, and we're expecting between 15,000 to 17,000 or 18,000 vehicles per day along this roadway by 2045. That's in comparison to 6,900 vehicles per day measured by DOT in 2019. In addition, this roadway is recommended to be upgraded to highway standards and signed as NC 751. That would also include an extension to the south all the way into Lillington. So that regional study recommendation acknowledged this is an important regional route heavily used by commuters, and recommended upgrading the facility. The main concerns were the potential loss of rural context on this roadway and property impacts. So there are portions of the corridor that are constrained. At the planning level, known major constraints include a cemetery located south of Olive Chapel Road, historic structures along the corridor, but especially concentrated kind of at the crossroads areas of Olive Chapel Road, Hume Olive Road, and Old US 1. There's also floodway and a crossing of the Little Beaver Creek through Army Corps property. So one of the things that we discussed at the previous meeting was that the town's typical section, kind of our starting point for both 2-lane rural thoroughfares and 4-lane median divided have the same right-of-way. So we require 110 feet of right-of-way for both. The other thing that Russell and I have been discussing is when we get to the stage of design, in very constrained areas, we could narrow the 4-lane median roadway down to a minimum of 80 feet. That would not allow for turn lanes, wouldn't allow for bike lanes, and it would narrow the what we call the verge or landscape strip between your pedestrian facilities and the edge of the road. So there's trade-offs. And that's why we want to do that at the time of design, when we know what the conditions are on the ground, we have survey, and we can look at turning movements and all of those details. I think that's the last slide on this one. So town council also asked, well, let's go back. So if you'll remember, planning staff did not make a recommendation regarding this change at your previous public hearing. And several town council members expressed that they would like planning staff to make a recommendation. So while we recognize the desire to maintain a rural corridor and minimize property impacts, we also recognize the regional importance of this route as future NC 751 and the capacity that's needed, as well as the flexibility during design to try to minimize impacts to the extent possible. And so with that in mind, we are recommending rejecting the proposed reversal and maintaining the 4-lane median divided thoroughfare designation. I can pause for comments on this one or go to the next one.
Any comments at this point?
Questions now, comments later?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do.
If any
okay.
questions.
Yeah, I'll save my comments.
Okay.
I don't have any questions.
I have a few questions.
Go
ahead, Ryan.
Thank you. The street section for the 4-lane median divided, that includes bicycle lanes and 2 11-foot travel lanes? And staff is supporting putting the bicycle lanes on 751? Is that right?
Better
So,
than what's there now.
Correct. I'm not, but where I'm going with this is,
Okay.
where I'm going with this, as a frequent user of 751, I think we want to advocate for not putting bicyclists adjacent to cars going 60 miles an hour. I think the 10-foot multi-use path might have merit in that case. So I question, can we, if we do decide to go with the 4-lane median divided, could we do 2 12-foot lanes and then shift that bicycle lane to the back curb?
Protected?
What's that?
Like protected lane, you mean, or?
Well, just take your 6 feet and put it with your 5 feet sidewalk and make it a multi-use path outside of adjacent to traffic.
so you'll see on this graphic, we have this description here of roadside / streetscape. And the plan in our typical section has flexibility in what we call the streetscape. And it needs to be consistent with our bike ped system plan map. So there's not always a bike lane on a 4-lane median divided thoroughfare. Our bike ped system plan map in some cases shows a 10-foot side path. In fact, a portion of New Hill Olive Chapel Road up to the American Tobacco Trail terminus has side path on the bike ped system plan map. So this is our starting point, and it's for, when we look at projects moving forward, this is kind of where we begin with our typical sections, but there are variations in what the street side and the median honestly can look like.
I was going to add one comment.
Russell wants to
Yes,
make a comment?
please.
Yeah, I just want to add a comment about the bike lanes. I mean, realize by state law, a cyclist can be out there no matter what. So if you don't provide the bike lanes, then that's just high-speed traffic having to share those lanes with the cyclists. So the idea is on through routes where we think there's going to be more, more regional cycling, we want to provide that area that's reserved away from the higher speed traffic. It would be, the intention would be a 45-mile-per-hour signed roadway, but of course, drivers will drive whatever they're comfortable with. So we would hope that the bike lanes would be compatible with the roadway and be a better condition than providing, just the 4-lane road with cyclists trying to share the lane. A lot of cyclists don't want to use shared use paths. So, it's another thing to keep in mind. And again, back to state law, we can't keep them from using the travel lane if they want to use the travel lane.
Yeah. I'm a frequent biker in this area, and it's gotten to the point, it's so dangerous right now that I won't go north of Hume Olive on this road because it's already too much traffic, and I can't imagine it with 2.5 times the number of vehicles. So I do agree with what you said, that it would be great to have the bike separated, but I think if you had 2 travel lanes and a dedicated striped bike lane, I would use it.
Feel better.
I would use it. So, But if my only alternative was a path, as a road biker, I probably wouldn't use it. So I agree with Russell's point, is when you're on a shared path, you've got strollers and kids on bikes. That's really great for commuting and for low-speed family recreation. It's not good for what most regional bikers are doing if they're doing long distances. So.
Shannon, what would the 4-lane part, would it end at Old US 1?
Actually, it extends further south of Old US 1, but it's already shown as 4-lane on the plan south of Old US 1.
Okay.
And north of Olive Chapel.
And you've got to deal with the historic district and moving it to a 4-lane through that interchange, correct?
So there is another.
Are you pressing your button to speak? Okay.
There is another recommendation from the Southwest Area Study that we are not ready to bring to Planning Board, but it addresses potentially looking at a bypass of the historic district of that area. And so we are working with Capital Area Preservation in Wake County to look at the historic district and make a recommendation, prepare a recommendation before we bring that to you. But yes, that intersection is challenging.
And how, is this long-term funding from federal and state?
This is not a funded project at this point, so we would require, depending on the project, the right-of-way for any development that moves forward, but it would be the same right-of-way in either case. It's 110 feet. And then development is required to make improvements based on their traffic impact. But the project would be included in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan update if supported by the town. If not, we would have to have conversations. And then that would kind of begin to put it in the prioritization process.
I guess yes, I live out there, so I'm kind of not objective about it. But it would seem to me that the traffic, as it sits now, hopefully that traffic pattern is going to change when 540 gets completed. And when you look at the cost of trying to go over Beaver Creek and the 7 historic structures along the way that are pretty close to the road, and looking at the cemetery, that it might be a good idea to keep it as a 2-lane right now, pending the outcome of 540 2 years from now. And the traffic lights, they're now on US 1 and New Holloman Road, I guess, at that point. So, I mean, that's my opinion. I think you look at environmental as well as historic structures, as well as that 4-way stop at New Hill Holloman. I mean, it gets to be an expensive ask even down the road.
So the model runs that were done as part of the regional study would have assumed completion of 540 because that was a funded project. So committed projects are accounted for. I mean, it's still, it's a computer model. Doesn't always exactly project what happens on the ground. But being that this would be designated as a highway project, that funding would most likely be coming from state and federal sources, not a local project. And that would happen over a long period of time of prioritization.
Can I
go to the next?
Can I ask a somewhat of a technical question for Mr. Dalton? If the current 12-foot travel lane on Highway 750, or I'm sorry, New Hill, Hume Olive Road, I think that's the name. I know that's 751, I know it's not, but that's what I call it. It's got 6-foot paved shoulders, 12-foot lane. What is the vehicle per hour on the speed limit that's posted today versus if we were to go with like a 45 posted with 2 11-foot lanes? Are we talking substantially higher? More volume that a 4-lane could take at a lower speed?
Well, when you're talking about capacity of a thoroughfare, you don't really talk of it in terms of speed limit. It's in terms of lanes. So 2-lane versus a 4-lane road. So 2-lane roads, 2-lane, 3-lane roads, you're looking around 15,000 to 18,000 ADT before they fail. 4-lane roads, easily, 35,000 or so vehicles. So you're definitely getting a huge increase in capacity. Almost double for a 4-lane road versus a 2-lane road. And then with certain measures of access control and other measures, you can squeeze more capacity out of a 4-lane road. With super streets, for instance, you can increase that capacity, but that just depends on, your treatments along the roadway.
Thank you.
Move to the next one?
Okay. Amendment 2.
All right, so second one that we are bringing back for potential reconsideration. It's a similar situation, but a different context. This is North Salem Street. Find my mouse. Here's 64. Here's Apex Peakway. So north of downtown Apex. The Southwest Area Study recommended, again, upgrading this, in this case, from a 3-lane thoroughfare to a 4-lane with median thoroughfare. This recommendation was based on traffic model runs that project between 23,000 and 26,500 vehicles per day by 2045. That's in comparison to 9,500 vehicles per day measured in 2019. So one change that we have made since this was previously brought before you is we made an administrative update to the plan to show the existing 5-lane section on North Salem between 64 and all-wheel drive. So really what we're focusing on now is the section between all-wheel drive and Apex Peakway. The main concern about widening is a change to the context of this gateway to the downtown area and potential impacts to properties along this fairly constrained corridor. Again, this is a similar situation where our 110-foot corridor could be minimized down to 80 feet at the time of design, looking at constraints and turning movements. So I know it's probably hard to see, but we did want to just go ahead and show the existing right-of-way that's out there. And then this edge line shows what 80 feet absolute minimum would look like through the corridor. So that's the absolute most constrained.
So the pink, if I'm looking at the same picture, is the current, and the yellow is the widened?
I can see the colors that you see.
I don't know, I'm colorblind, so I'm probably got it all wrong.
So I could probably escape and try to zoom in on this. Hopefully I don't mess anything up.
Hit the zoom bar down at the bottom.
Yeah, the bottom right.
Oh, thank you.
There we go.
That helps.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So the very far to the outside line is what minimum 80 feet. I mean, this is planning level, not designed, would look like. And then the inner line is existing. So again, just, a quick picture without any kind of design being done of what the most constrained corridor could look like. And of course, this has already changed.
So how many historic structures will be impacted by that?
9.
None?
9.
Oh, 9, okay. Got it.
But we do need to be careful about, determining impacts at a planning level without survey data, without knowing the context on the ground at the time that it would actually be built, because things do change, and without having a design. So.
Is it 9 properties or 9 structures?
Structures.
Would have to be moved?
Well, I don't think, looking at that they'd have to be moved, but certainly you would all but damage the character that entryway now has. You'd be going within feet of somebody's front porch now, so.
Got it.
So, this amendment had also previously been reviewed with staff from Public Works and Transportation, Police, Fire, and EMS. There were no concerns from a capacity perspective. Also, the police department noted that there could be a benefit to this project associated with providing an additional lane of traffic, especially during carpool times for Thales, which tends to create backups. Planning staff did not make a recommendation. Again, we were asked to provide one. So, given the high traffic volumes projected for this corridor, the strong public sentiment the planning board noted during your last meeting for addressing traffic congestion, the change in context that has already occurred between US 64 and Apex Peakway, and the flexibility to minimize impacts to the extent feasible during design, planning staff are again recommending rejecting the proposed reversal of the recently approved amendment and maintaining the 4-lane median divided thoroughfare on our adopted plan. Any further questions?
I just want to make that clear, so you're actually saying, we're actually saying staff is making recommendation to maintain what was previously
Approved.
as a 4-lane. from
Last month.
Okay.
Yes. So don't make any changes to the adopted plan at this point. Keep both the 4-lane median divided thoroughfares on the plan. It's our recommendation, planning staff.
And that's just through to the Apex Peakway.
Correct.
Yep.
Thanks, Shannon.
Okay, thanks.
Any public comments? Seeing none, I can bring, like I said, I brought the minutes. I can, if you want to hear what we discussed. So on Monday, for Amendment 3, the comments were it'll change the area quite a bit, but there are already a number of developments as you go down Old US 1 and can understand why staff does not have a recommendation. 751 is a major collector. Would it be extended with extra width? And the answer was yes. Staff will bring a future amendment that would add a side path to New Hill Olive Chapel Road from the south side to the American Tobacco Trail, and we'll be looking at bike facilities as well. 751 is wide enough to have 4 lanes with a median. There's a lot of traffic and growth along New Hill Olive Chapel Road. A connection between US 1 and US 64 would be good. Planner Cox added that the recommendation for the New Hill Olive Chapel Road is not just driven by what is happening in Apex. It is identified as a regional recommendation from the Southwest Area Study because it is the future 751. And let's see, I think I had. So on Wednesday when we came back, there were some of the comments from the board where we don't want to bottleneck here. We would rather see this stay rural. There's so much development going along this area and we have to widen it. Based on the projections for this area for 2045, any development that comes along, they will have to widen any frontage and want to make sure that the cemetery along this corridor is taken into consideration. And then we did vote to pass it 6-0. So any other comments, discussions on amendment number 1?
Where else where it starts in Durham all the way to the current terminus point, is it 4-lane median divide? I guess near South Point Mall, near Mark Jacobson Lexus. It'd be about the only place I can think of.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know that, I mean, Russell had to speak to that. I think what they're saying, they just want to make it so that there's potential to make it wider. Not that 751 could actually go, would it go to all 5 or 4 lanes plus median if if the state decides that they want 751 on the northern portion of 64 North.
Yeah, so I think what we're saying, what Shannon was saying is that for prioritization in the future, they would look, of course, to our local plans would be taken forward to the MPO to make sure they match up with the regional plans, and it would be eligible for funding in the future when funding becomes available to improve the roadway. The problem is if we keep a very constrained local plan and just say, well, we want to keep rural character and only 2 lanes, then that may cause a problem in the future to justify funding, because it looks like the local body is not in favor of funding. I remember we went through a similar discussion about NC 55 over a decade ago when we argued about should it remain 2-lane, 3-lane, should it be 4-lane. Ultimately, the town, at that time, the town didn't want to go to a 4-lane road. Ultimately, we decided we really do need a 4-lane road, and then funding kind of came around. Now that's been delayed, but that's the more recent exercise I've been involved in, where we had a major roadway that, back some time ago, we thought we could keep it a 2-lane, 3-lane road, and really it wasn't such a great idea when it comes to traffic.
So I guess the question over here was, do you have any knowledge about what's happening with 751 north of 64? Because a lot of that is, I guess, a pretty wide 2-lane road, but as you get closer to South Point, it gets bigger.
Yeah, I'm not aware of how it's classified for that entire distance. I just, did we ever research that to see exactly how they?
And that was outside of the study.
Yeah.
So it would not have been addressed through the updated.
It seems like the focus of this is to connect the 64 and the 1, as you mentioned. And I've noticed, I live out in this area too, and I've noticed a lot of people, as more developments are happening out west, that people don't want to come back over to the 540. They want to shoot up to the 64 or down to the 1. So
Yeah, and what they've seen in this area and others where you have loops and you have outer loops is what will happen in the short term is it does relieve traffic on some of those thoroughfares, but in the long term, those outer loops also spur additional growth.
Yeah.
And that growth eventually starts to fill in inside the loop and starts to overload those roadways again. So the 2-lane roadways just have a very limited amount of capacity, especially when you've got major intersections. 2-lane, 3-lane road is not that bad when you've got minor intersections that are just stop signs on the side street. But as volume increases and you get more major intersections with a lot of turning volumes, it fails really quickly. 2-lane road can only handle so much traffic.
Yeah. Well, and we've already lost the real character from Old 1 up to Jordan Manors and just a little beyond. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's already well underway development, and it doesn't feel rural there anymore. And it's got to be widened. It would be dangerous to leave it there, but. Then the northern part is today more rural, but there's a lot of development going on in that area, and it's going to continue.
I keep coming back to 1010, where
Yeah.
people say, why isn't it widened? Well, because we didn't
Yeah.
somebody didn't do something 20 years ago
Yeah.
to allow for it. And
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't want to be, saying, well, 20 years ago, we could have made it a 5-lane.
We didn't, yeah.
It's not that it has to be done now, but I think
Yeah.
we should.
I don't know. My opinion on this was complicated. I think I shared it with you guys that I was kind of leaning towards leaving it more rural, even though I bike on this road, but I tend to avoid it. But then between the Monday night and the Wednesday night when we took our vote, I went out and drove it, and I said, in my car instead of my bike, and I said, no, this is a problem. So I'm really conflicted, but I'm still of the opinion that we need to widen this to the maximum ability we have.
And I think the 1010 is the perfect example for us
Yeah.
to rely
Yes.
on. Because we hear promises year after year after year, oh, we're going to get the state to do this. It's not happening.
Yeah.
We've seen it too many times.
Yeah.
So I get where we're going, being proactive.
Any other?
Yeah, Shannon, you wouldn't happen to have an overlay of what 110 would look like at the intersection of Hume Olive and Olive Chapel?
I know.
Okay.
And that's.
Because you have, my concern is you literally have cemetery on both sides of the road. What is that going to look like when we have 4 lanes divided, pedestrian?
And-
Are you going to have to change it?
And that's why I was hesitant even to have Will prepare the one for North Salem Street, because it's based on aerials and, measuring. out from an aerial and not a design at all, not surveyed, not looking at the topography, not the conditions that will change, although cemetery would not at that time. The cemetery is really close to the street. I think that it's potentially, it could be impacted by a widening, but I can't say conclusively whether or not it would be at this time. We would need to look at that through the design process and how to minimize that to the extent possible.
Is the development that's going on across the street from the cemetery, across, I keep wanting to call it something else, but along Olive Chapel, is that development come all the way to the road in question, or is it stop at the pond? And the reason I'm asking is because that's being developed right now, this would be the time to do enough planning to say that you could extend this street towards the east instead of the west. That way you could avoid hitting the cemetery.
Yeah, and I think you're asking about Willow Hills, so it goes around the cemetery. They do have a plan to install sidewalk around the cemetery frontage, and they're currently working with the church on that plan because obviously there are, like we said, the cemetery is extremely close to the road, may even be within existing right-of-way in some cases. So they're working out a plan to try and make sure they minimize those impacts.
Is the cemetery?
The church parking lot too. The church parking lot is very close to the road, so you're going to be taking up church parking lot, taking up the cemetery.
Right.
I mean, it will be affected. I mean, it's 110 feet is very wide.
Yeah. So again, it's important to point out this is one of those examples where it's a major intersection, and regardless of what we do long term, there's going to be a lot of traffic there. So even as turn lanes go in, even without a 4-lane road, I think you're going to have impacts with turn lanes. I mean, I think there's just no way around it at that location. But again, like Shannon's saying, through the design process, we figure that out. But I don't think there's going to be a way to avoid impacts there.
And the widths are the same, regardless.
Yep.
Both 110 feet of.
You have 110 feet doesn't mean you have to use it.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a 110-foot right of way. I mean, but if you decide to do two lanes with a turn lane, I mean that's.
Right, but
I understand it, and I'm very conflicted on that too.
Yeah, for example, like a typical DOT section for just a 2-lane state route with ditches with sidewalk on both sides, you need 90 feet just to accommodate that to get a standard ditch in there. So to give you an idea of the right of way, with curb and gutter, you can get more lanes in there and squeeze it in, but when you've got a 4-lane road, there's only so much you can squeeze it with the lanes that you have. So, no matter what you do, again, I think there's going to be impacts to that intersection as turn lanes are needed.
And they're going to be needed.
Yes, they will.
Yeah.
Olive Chapel's growing.
Yes.
A lot.
Mr. Dalton, if this future transportation plan amendment is adopted, does that mean that when somebody adjacent to this corridor, I want to call it 751. I'm going to call it 751. Adjacent to it comes in, they'd be responsible for their half of a 4-lane median divide, and would they be responsible to build the asphalt at the time of master site plan approval, CD approval, construction drawing approval?
So we don't require ultimate widening along the frontage for subdivisions that come in unless there's some reason there's a traffic impact that shows a need for additional lanes. They would essentially build the lanes they need. So I guess the answer to your question is no. Just because it becomes a 4-lane road on our plan doesn't mean that the developer has to widen for that additional lane for the pavement to sit out there for the next 10 to 15 years not being used.
Right.
Any other questions for Russell or any other discussions on Amendment 1? Or possible motion?
I guess I'll make a motion just for Amendment 1, right?
Right, that's all we're doing now. Is just
I move that the planning board reject the proposal to reverse the widening of New Hill Hall of Chapel Road.
So you're voting to not downgrade, but to keep it.
You keep it as is. Would that be a better motion? I move that we keep it as is and do not reverse.
Keep it as planned.
Keep it as planned, the current plan.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any other discussion before we vote?
This one's tough. There's varying degrees of sentiment on this, and I'm kind of coming in late on this one because you guys already had a prior vote, so I don't want to upend that one. I just have a real tough time supporting a 4-lane and putting bicycles out here. And I know, Mr. Steele, you're a user of the network for cycling. I drive this road too, and it really concerns me to see the people driving at 65 miles an hour, and then you come upon a cyclist. I see it. I don't. I know we're a planning board, and we don't look at the here and now. We're supposed to be looking out what it could be. So for me, I want to say yes to the 4-lane because it's what it would be in the future. The reality of a user of this network, I have a strong concern about it being there to have cyclists on this stretch. Having said that, and I heard Mr. Dalton and Ms. Cox's point, and I think Mr. Steele, you said the same thing. This is between two thoroughfares, 64 and Old US 1. I don't think you have that situation elsewhere down the 751 corridor.
Right.
For that reason, I think I could get behind this being a 4-lane median divided, but I would stress more than ever, and again, Mr. Steele, I hear you on wanting to ride on the main road and not be segregated or separated out to the multi-use path, but my gosh, people are not going to slow down on this road. They just won't.
Yeah.
So I would push for separated bicycle routes and even allow for back a curb to multi-use path to kind of play into some of the restrictions that we're seeing against the cemetery and some of the other environmental issues. Perhaps we can do one side of the road widened and not have multi-use path on both sides to allow for accommodating, offset widening and things of that nature. I think there's ways to solve this. So for that reason, I think I can get behind it and support it.
And as Russell said, that all that can happen at design stage, not, we're just basically saying that we want the corridor to be wider.
And the reason that we're trying to get it where it is the 4-lane is because we have come to realize that if we communicate to the state and to the surrounding areas that we want to keep it rural, then the chances of getting that later down the road are less likely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the way I'm thinking because I have seen the experience of 1010. And I know I keep going back to it, but I'm done with that because I know we can't make these, people make promises right and left. That, I'm going to talk to the state and I'm going to make this happen. No, I'm sorry, don't give me that campaign promise because it ain't happening. I've been here too long. So I think that there is a lot to be said. I hate this. I think there's a lot to be said that we're trying to think forward, and I am worried about all these other things, but I don't want us to have the same 1010 problem. That's the only way I know how to describe it because it is just so critical and it comes up all the time.
The other thing that we said in our notes to the council, and it's I keep thinking back to the survey we did and how high the residents of Apex, how dissatisfied they are with traffic. And they blame, in a way, they blame us.
Oh, they do.
Because they say, you've let all this go on without any planning. And it's like, if only you knew, right? If only you knew.
And just one other comment. I do have a problem with the bicycle. I was a big bicyclist for years and years, back in the day when you could ride anywhere and it was great. So I do have some worry about that. But I have the 1010 issue, which is a bigger thing, but public safety is so important, and I do think we need to be proactive about things like that. And I don't know how you fit that and make that work, but I want to do what we need to do for the future, but I also think that thinking about that bike issue is an important part of this.
I think we should have a separate discussion about bikes because I have spent a lot of time looking at the bike plan separately from what we've done here. And I think we have a really good bike plan. I'm just worried it's going to take 20 years to achieve any meaningful part of it. And when it's implemented, it diverts people off of some of these busy streets to go down the greenways. But until the greenways are built, people got no option, right? So, but if any of you want to have an offline discussion on biking, I can be your subject matter expert. So are you, right, Reggie? You're a biker too. Yeah. Yeah. We'll be glad to share with you our own personal experience.
Okay. So we have
we're for vote?
a motion from Mark and you second. Okay.
Second from Keith.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So since we rejected, do we need reasons or since we denied the?
There's not a planning board report to town council.
Okay.
So they just get the vote.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure. Didn't need any. All right, and then the amendment number 2, I'll get our notes just so we have those. Let's see. If we had as many comments. Oh, yeah, so amendment number, it was 5 last time. The North Salem Street widening is highly needed. 1 lane each way is currently insufficient. The Apex Peakway would be a diversion around the town. Worry about how this will damage the entryway into the downtown. Is Davis Drive going to be widened? And the answer was yes, it would support the widening recommendations. Concerned with some of the older homes along North Salem and how they will be impacted. They will have to do the best through their plan of Cox started that we start with 110 feet and then look at the details and minimize the impact, but it would be tight. And during the vote, no comments from the public. Once again, our comments were this area is very tight for widening, concerned with the older homes along the road and how it will damage the landscape of these properties. There are 6 homes affected. I think we've heard that there are 9. Or at least 9 structures. And will widening fit within the existing right-of-way? Planner Cox stated we would have a better answer to that. We would not have a better answer until we had a design and conduct surveys. Those are comments from 2 months ago. Any other additional comments or possible motion? I think we still have the same concern. It's very tight, but the traffic is extremely, I mean,
It's a bottleneck.
it's a bottleneck.
Yeah, the other problem is the Peakway is designed, especially as we're trying to complete it, to offload the center.
Right.
And if we don't allow people to get from the Peakway to the 64, then people will find another way. And that creates other issues, right? Like cutting through the villages.
Yeah.
People do that,
Oh,
right?
yeah, they do.
People do it now, so.
I think somebody echoed that the Thales Academy during, drop off and or let out is also a catastrophe at times. So I think, the more
Yes.
options we have there.
Well, I take some comfort in the fact that that area, that stretch from 64 to the Peakway has been changing. We put in the school, the car dealership down there now. I just see it shifting away from the residential, and I've been here for a long time, so I've seen all that change. It used to be a very quaint little street and all, but I can see some justification, because I have seen the backups. And so I think that we've just got to do it. I think that the people are asking for it,
I
and
agree.
I'm just in favor of it at this point.
Is that your motion?
Oh, yeah, make a motion that is this one of these reversal things or
Yeah.
something?
Yes.
All right,
We got a
so,
vote to deny the,
okay, I would make a motion that we deny the reversal and recommend maintaining a 4-lane median divided thoroughfare.
I do have one comment, though. I'm just curious to know, if this were to change traffic heading into town, generally speaking, if you have more area to drive, you're going to drive a little quicker. And are we going to now face a bottleneck once we hit the Peakway? And is that going to, I mean, are we going to have more people continuing maintaining that speed all the way through into town?
Or,
It's like leading Cary Parkway into a 2-lane road right into downtown, and all of a sudden we're saying, slow down.
well, I would put that in the form of a question to Russell, is what can be done at the intersection to keep what he just said from happening, to kind of signal to the motorists, you're coming to now a historic area, slow down when you cross the Peakway?
I think one thing the police have done as you get into downtown, they have the radar signs, so you can have certain kinds of active warning devices. We don't usually recommend widespread use of those because drivers become desensitized to them when you use them too much. And obviously they cost a lot more up front and a lot more to maintain. But that's an option. Certainly there are things you can do with design, with streetscape elements to enhance the appearance of roadways and kind of narrow down the visual effects. Street trees and things like that can make a street look more urban, promote lower speeds. So those are considerations as well. Also, how we transition the lanes at the Peakway has some effect as well. When you've got a 4-lane road coming into an intersection, if you start to taper down, at that intersection in an effective way, you can essentially create that transition before you cross through the intersection, as opposed to carrying the lanes and dropping them, south of the intersection. You lose some capacity that way, but it does help to encourage. Like, for instance, the southbound lane at the Peakway would probably just drop as a right turn lane. So you'd have a single through lane and you'd have a right turn lane. And then northbound, one of the things we could do is, instead of developing 2 lanes just north of the intersection, right there at the intersection, you could have a single lane that tapers out to 2 lanes to kind of choke down traffic at the intersection. So again, those are various design elements we can look at when it comes forward.
Could we make that as
Another
a-
question for you is also, trying to go northbound and towards Highway 64. In the morning times, people trying to get out of the neighborhood already have a very hard time. Now, once you make that 4 lanes, and if it's going to have a median, so they're going to be forced to only be able to turn right.
You're talking about Britley Way coming out there, or? And there's also the Magnolia neighborhood as well.
Really way, yep.
Yeah, we'd have to look at all those. I mean, Britley Way is one of those locations where obviously we've had requests for traffic signal over the years. It just doesn't have enough traffic there. We do have, I would expect local connections to happen between the Haddon Hall neighborhood and All-Wheel Drive, paralleling Salem Street, which should provide some relief for local traffic to get up to All-Wheel Drive to get to a signal. One of the things that we worked with Crossroads Ford on was a local connection for Thales to get up to the signal at what's called Keyring Drive across from All-Wheel Drive. So that provided a local parallel route. So those are some of the things we're doing to kind of relieve local pressure and give people alternatives to a signal. In between, we do come forward with funding at some point and want to look at more refined design. We'll probably want to look at access control at some of these intersections, which might mean a much narrower median barrier and no turn lane. So yeah, some of these intersections you may have to turn right. You may not be able to allow to turn left, but we would want that local connectivity in place to give them another route to get to a safer location, to get to a traffic signal to make those movements. So again, all those things have to be considered as part of that design process when we're trying to figure out how that traffic flow is going to work.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Are we able to recommend a non-rejection reversal and in fact embellish the traffic control, like suggest to council if they were to hear this, that the planning board would also recommend traffic attenuation such as landscaping in the verge or landscape in the median, things of that nature? Or
We can add those comments to what we send to council.
I mean, it's not a usual thing to do for a long-range plan.
Oh, okay.
There's no way to document it
Sure.
past telling council that's what your hope would be.
Okay.
I mean, it's a long-range plan. and all
Because
those
it's
things
long
will be
range, okay.
looked at when a project comes forward.
It is a state road at that point north of the Peakway, so we would work with NCDOT. But to give you an idea, like for NC 55, for example, we worked with DOT very closely during their design process for that, which of course before funding got stopped at the state, we made it to about 25% plans, but we looked at hardscape elements, we looked at trees and other design elements to try and make it a more enhanced roadway. We could certainly have that option up here. I mean, it could move forward as a local project if the town wanted to do it at some point in the future, or it might be a state TIP project like 55, where we're having to actually provide extra funding for those elements. But I think that's one of those gateway roadways where we would want to encourage that during the process, and I think that's just a given with staff, when we get to that point.
Thanks, Russell.
Thank you.
So we have a motion to deny the proposed amendment to downgrade and keep it as existing plan.
I'd second that.
And I have a second from Reggie. Any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so 2 weeks ago, we lost the Andrew Martin house on the corner of the Peakway. Talking to the family of the previous owners, part of the reason that house went outside the family was directly because of the Peakway and the traffic that comes with it. I think that if this becomes a 4-lane road, you will see the other 9 houses, because of their proximity to the road as it is right now. I think you will see all 9 of those houses go away. And I think that that's the entrance to historic downtown Apex. The average age of a house, the average date of the house built out there was about 1920.
I share that same concern.
I just sort of believe, Highway 55 is widened to get people through Apex and into Apex. And if we continue to widen these roads of entrance to Apex, then I think the small town character starts to continue to fade away a little bit more in the rearview mirror. So,
If the name of the game is efficiency, quit building houses and build big roads. We can get out quick. I don't mind the traffic right there in that small little spot. I'd rather deal with the traffic in the mornings and a little bit of time and the Thales drop off and the Thales pick up in the afternoons. Outside of that traffic through there is not that bad. So I don't,
Yeah, but
you need to
remember,
quit
that's
whining
today.
about the traffic.
It's going to
right
triple in
It's
the
going to
next
triple in 20 years.
20 years.
there. It's going to triple where?
That's the
horse.
projections is
Well, where are
goes
those
from
houses
9,500 to 23 to 26,000 in the next.
Peakway will
Are
be
we
4
going to
lanes.
take up the storage area and build homes there now or something?
No,
Where are these extra
No,
homes
this is-
coming from?
It's stopping at the traffic light of the Peakway. But the Peakway will be 4 lanes all the way around. You're
Yeah.
gonna have to have tributaries to and from it.
Maybe I'm the odd one out here, but
I think you do have tributaries, but I don't think you have every road be a tributary.
No, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments?
I think listening to the dialogue, and again, I wasn't part of the original vote, so forgive me, but looking at the long range, I think that given the future traffic and the fact that Apex is growing like Cary did in the 90s, and we have this influx of so many people that want to go to our downtown and enjoy what our downtown is, I hear you on the gateway, but at the same time, these people see the gateway for a minute, and then they're in the downtown trying to find a place to park and then enjoy the downtown. So we're looking past 7 properties for the fact that this is a stretch of road that you're trying to fit thousands and thousands of cars. So the long range planning aspect, I see the merit. The now is we have properties that are gorgeous, and to lose those, you only have one shot. So again, the now, I don't like it. The future, I get it. Looking at it from a planning aspect, I'd have to agree that it's warranted, but the reality is I don't like that it's warranted.
Yeah.
I agree with it.
And I think what you say is true about the beauty of those homes there, and that is a part of the entrance into Apex, but long-term future, I just have seen so much change along there already, and it's already moving that direction. I'm just glad to know that it's stopping at Apex Peakway, and then the rest of the entrance will be there into the town. But I don't disagree with you. You are not alone on appreciating the historical value of those homes.
People say they like the hometown feel, they love the charm of Apex, and then we're gonna make it to where you don't see it anymore. But we got a nice downtown. Well, are we building the town for everybody else to come, or are we building the town for us to enjoy?
Right.
You know,
Well,
I was born and raised walking those very streets.
Right, right.
These things mean something to some of these people around here. I don't really care to have widen the roads just for efficiency for everybody else who wants to come and enjoy. That's great, but maybe you can deal with a little bit of traffic. You know, I don't know. I just can't get behind this one.
And a long-range plan, though, is just a plan. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. It's just, as things progress, there will be a decision, and it may be that they decide not to ever do this.
Yeah.
But it's there if there's a need to do it and a desire to do it, because there will be other people on this planning board that'll say, you know what, those people way back, I don't know what they were thinking, we don't want to do it. Okay, but it's there if we need it, I guess, and I don't know if that's.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts that are probably, as Diane said, can't be put into the record and can't be tracked, but I got to believe that some of these houses could be moved away from the road at a reasonable cost. And if people are interested in purchasing those properties and they want to preserve those historic homes, I think that's an option to them. The lots are pretty deep. There is room to move them back. So, and I know that's not trivial, but it's a possibility.
I moved a story-and-a-half building that was built in 1820 from Cary Parkway to my house, and it was in a rough shape. Still is. It was $21,000 to do that, to move the Upchurch Williams house across 540, I think went to the tune of about $180,000. And on the east side, you've got the railroad right behind you, so they're not as deep as you might think they are.
Chairman, what was the vote on this?
We haven't voted yet.
No, I'm sorry, back when it was.
We have a motion to.
No, he's asking in October.
Oh, it was
Yes.
6-0.
Well, it was 8-0?
6-0,
sorry.
Ready to vote?
So, yeah, so all those in favor to not downgrade back to the existing road, but to allow for the 4-lane, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
No.
So we have 2 nays. Ryan and Tim. Since we're going on 2 hours, Diane, is yours long or is it?
It's detailed.
If you make it long, if we could at least do the first one so that the engineering supervisor can.
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine. I was just checking.
Okay, so new business number 1 is requested by Public Works and Transportation staff. So Adam Stevenson, our engineering supervisor, is here to answer any questions you have. But essentially, we are updating and modernizing our ordinance in order to be consistent with state law and the current practice. And so there are a lot of amendments that you'll see in the document. They're very technical. So I'll let Adam, I don't know if you had a presentation or if you just wanted to answer questions.
I'll just hit a few items.
Yeah, that was a tough read.
Yes. My head hurt when I was done.
Basically, it was like, let's just trust Adam.
Okay.
You read it?
Good call.
So
We did read it.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Okay, so I'm here as floodplain administrator for the town. As Diane said, our goal is to adhere to minimum FEMA standards. All of this language was provided to us by the state, so I got a lot of help from the Department of Public Safety, Emergency Management Division. The language is taken from there. They have a model ordinance for all non-coastal communities, so that's where all this language came from. But 2 key, I'll say the most important changes, under 6.2.6, basis for establishing the special flood hazard areas. This is going to allow for automatic adoption of new maps. So our current maps were issued in 2006. We've been waiting since, I think it was 2015. They came out with preliminary maps. We understood they were going to be made effective within a couple years. We're here 5 years later, still waiting. But I am told the latest within the next 12 months, I expect they will be issued and go effective. The second important change is 6.2.16, provisions for flood hazard reduction. So we're incorporating language for letters of map change. These are permits issued by FEMA that allow for encroachment into floodways and non-encroachment areas. This has been common practice, as Dan said, not changing anything, but we like the language to account for that, so it's important to have in there. And while I'm here real quick, I would like to share flood insurance data for the town. We have 121 policies in force, and the total annual premiums are just over $53,000. The total insurance value of all the flood insurance is $36 million. The town joined the National Flood Insurance Program in 1992. So from that point to today, this is current as of last week, we've had a total of 3 closed paid losses with flood insurance. The total value of all those paid losses, $1,300.
Wow.
So, but my favorite part of it, important to note, all 3 claims were outside of, they're in Zone X, so they're outside of the 1% annual chance, essentially the FEMA, what FEMA maps, the FEMA floodplain. So I think that says a lot about, as a community, kind of where we stand from a floodplain management perspective.
Good job.
So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any questions for Adam?
Is there any of the language that was inserted here that you had a problem with?
No, ma'am. And again, it's pulling from the model ordinance. A lot of it will never apply, but better safe than sorry. That's kind of the approach.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a-
Possible motion.
I have a comment very quick. I've worked with Mr. Stevenson on several CLOMARs and LOMARs in the town of Apex, and I got to say on record, there's probably not a finer floodplain administrator in the triangle, and I work with a lot of them, so keep up the good work.
Hey, up.
Yay.
It's just my side gig.
Okay.
So possible motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve, we recommend approval for amendments to section 6.2 as presented.
I'll second that.
Motion for Mark, second by Ryan. Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're close enough. We're not going to put,
Yeah.
let's just plow through. Let's go, Diane.
I'll cross my legs.
All right, so,
Lost my edge.
Bonnie, were you able to get that vote and who made the motions? Because I'm going to need to get those. It's very hard for me to be,
Yeah.
to
We
be
should,
here.
we should raise our hands.
Yeah, it was Mark and Ryan.
That made the motion,
Yeah. Mark made it first and Ryan second.
and it was unanimous, okay.
It was unanimous.
So I've got to type in, and usually I'm typing in while Amanda's doing this, so I just need to,
You can tell us to pause.
well, no, it'll take a while. I was going to spend the break doing it, but it's okay. So amendment, new business number 2. Here we go. Oh, sorry. New business 2, amendment 1. This is requested by staff. And the first one is in regard to master subdivision final plats. Essentially, a meets and bounds description is required for the RCA, but it's only in the application when it really should be in the UDO. And so just like final site plan plats, we'd like for the master subdivision final plat to have a meets and bounds description. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Amendment number 2. This is in regard to parking lot design standards. It would add a new subsection requiring that non-residential and/or multifamily sites proposed along a thoroughfare provide vehicular cross-access easements to adjacent non-residential and/or multifamily sites. And currently, these cross-access easements are negotiated by staff with the applicant during rezoning and/or site plan review. So, in terms of what some of the standards that we would be proposing, a 25-foot minimum cross-access easement with a 20-foot minimum cross-connection. If the property is next to a vacant property that's zoned or shown on the 2045 land use map from non-residential or multifamily use, then a stub for the future cross-access would be constructed as close as possible to the common property line. In addition, the location of that cross-access easement and connection would be approved by the Director of Public Works and Transportation or their designee based on the following factors, which would be existing cross-access easements, topography, location of environmental features, safety considerations, and then existing infrastructure obstructions. Sites proposed for development adjacent to an existing vehicular cross-access easement and connection would be required to construct the driveway through the easement to the adjoining parking lot or driveway. And the additional driveway access to the thoroughfare would be avoided except in cases where the Director of Public Works and Transportation found that it met the distancing requirements listed here. Exceptions to the cross-access requirements may be granted by Director of Public Works and Transportation based on site-specific constraints that make it impractical to dedicate cross-access easements and connections. And it's the same list with existing cross-access easements to topographical differences, environmental features, vehicle safety, security, or existing infrastructure obstructions. And the rights of vehicular access should be granted to all abutting properties and recorded with Wake County Register of Deeds contemporaneously with the recording of the site plan final plat, and no CO would be issued until the evidence of recordations provided to Planning and Community Development Department. And the last one's just to change the G to an H. And so, sorry, it's hard to breathe through this thing. So the reason we wanted to go ahead and get this in the ordinance is that we've had issues in the past where we've had projects on a thoroughfare not provide cross-access, and if it's already past the rezoning stage, it's difficult for us to get those requirements. We did look at the City of Raleigh and City of Greensboro's cross-access policies in order to come up with these standards. It is something that is important so that folks do not have to exit from one business or multifamily location, go out on a main highway just to get back in. An example I would give would be on NC 55 north of 64. You've got Vision Drive with businesses on it that doesn't connect to Beaver Creek Townhomes, which are actually apartments that do not connect to Cameron, I think it's Woods, Glen, that does not connect to the Aldi and the Walgreens. All of that should be connected. And with this kind of ordinance, when we have new projects on thoroughfares, they would end up connecting. So people wouldn't have to go out onto 55 and back in.
Yeah, the question that was brought up in the public comment is having those dimensions in there specifically spelled out, is that?
So I think that I don't know, Russ, if you want to speak to why those numbers were given, and if we need to have an exception added, how that would best be done.
Yeah, I think we looked at typically how we would recommend access, and I think, Mr. Roach brought up some good points. I think between now and the council meeting, what I'd recommend, maybe if he wants to reach out to us with if he thinks there's more flexible language that would be more amenable to development, we can certainly look at it and consider it. I think we were trying to provide what we felt like were reasonable guidelines based on the types of roadways we're talking about, because in a lot of cases, you have a major thoroughfare, a lot of these roads are planned for future 4-lane divided. You really don't want a whole lot of access points, because one of the things we deal with is, with congestion is we certainly want to widen roadways, But the other thing that really hurts your traffic capacity is having a lot of driveways. We want to try to minimize those driveways because every one of those driveways is friction along a roadway. We'd rather have land uses connected. But again, I think between now and council, if he's got suggestions for flexibility in the language, we'd be open to looking at that.
Good deal.
And this is only,
That was a good point, Jeff, and we actually did provide this language to Triangle Community Coalition folks and other folks who are on our list just to get comments, and I think Amanda said Jeff was the only one she heard from, but I didn't hear the specific comment about the distances, because I agree with you, there needs to be some kind of mechanism.
Yeah, you guys need flexibility.
Yeah, I agree.
When does this go to council?
It's due at noon tomorrow, so we're gonna work with him tomorrow. We'll get something in
Jim, do you have a
there.
question?
We'll get something in
I
there.
was just making sure, so this is only pertaining to the non-residential multifamily, there's no other,
It's not residential.
right, okay.
Okay.
I have a question about the exceptions, safety considerations. For all the multifamily projects I've been fortunate to have entitled, cross-access through multifamily always comes up as a no-go because of safety concerns. Most multifamily folks don't want people that aren't part of the community traversing through their community. How do you propose we can get around that? Like, is a safety consideration, is that, like, could I just say, well, it's multifamily, we don't feel safe if people are driving through our community? I mean,
I think there would have to be something, it would have to be a more specific thing than that. I mean, essentially what's happened is the multifamily projects have created gated communities, whereas other communities cannot be gated with public streets. And so we've had some just do alternate connections where it's not through their community. I believe there's a connection from the apartments next to the Walmart, but I don't think it goes through their neighborhood, because we had an issue at one time with that.
Yeah, I could add that a lot of the apartment complexes we've been involved with in the past 5 years or so have actually built public roadways as part of mixed-use type projects where there's other commercial components. So the direct access to the thoroughfare is via a public street, not private driveway connections. So that cross-access is provided in a different way. I think what you're talking about is like if you've got a thoroughfare and there's an apartment complex that wants to come in with direct private access to the thoroughfare, and I can understand from that perspective. But more recently we haven't had that experience with apartment complexes coming in. I think we would encourage, I think under this rule that would require them to have that cross-access. So, maybe that's one thing we need to consider if that case comes up. But again, I heard the question about, like, what if a daycare has somebody come in next door and they don't want them connecting? I understand that concern, but at the same time, we're trying to preserve the capacity and safety on our public roadways. And we don't want to end up with situations where you have lots and lots of driveways. You really need to be smart about consolidating access and providing access between uses, because it's really going to be better for everybody, as a whole. And maybe if one particular land use says, well, I don't want cross access through my property here for this specific land use, maybe that's not a good site for that land use.
Who handles that negotiation? I mean, do you guys get involved, or is it between the two landowners?
We have been successful in working with projects, even with Mr. Roach, and getting cross access. I think that's what he was talking about, is that as rezonings come forward, we sometimes have conditions, or as site plans come forward, they may want to have cross access to facilitate access for multiple uses because of access restrictions along the roadway, and working with town and working with DOT. This helps us with more specific guidance and things that we can point to say you have to do this and follow these rules, versus more of a negotiation at TRC depending on the type of land use. And we like negotiations, but you have so many projects coming in, and some developers, some people are easier to work with than others, so it helps to have better guidance in the form of the UDO.
Thanks, Russell.
All right, so So amendment number 3 is in regard to single-family residential uses on corner lots. That they would note on the master subdivision final plat which lot line is the front lot line, and that way we know where the driveway is coming from. And except as provided in the next section, which we'll get to, the final plat shall note that the lot access shall be limited to basically one driveway, and that this would not come from a thoroughfare or major collector street. So this is the exception. So single-family residential property is limited to one driveway access point, except in the following cases. A circular drive that's contributing to the historic nature of historic structure as defined in section 12.2. We have this a lot on some of the old country roads like Olive Chapel Road. B, homes without an existing garage or carport where a proposed garage or carport would be served from a different street than the existing driveway. We see this in the downtown a lot where there used to be alleys and there are no more alleys. The house on the corner really doesn't have any room for a driveway to go to a garage from the front, but it does from the side, and so that would be an exception. And then the construction of an accessory apartment where the accessory apartment would be served from a different street than the primary driveway. And again, through the downtown plan, we have found quite a few lots that could have accessory dwelling units if they could have access from a side street. Any questions? Okay. So Amendment 4 is really, really hard. We're changing 8.7 to 8.6. This is a typo. So that's that. We do recommend approval of the amendments as proposed, but we will work with Jeff on that exception. We're not going to come up with it tonight, but tomorrow we'll have something to recommend for council.
Thanks for the accommodation. Any other questions for Diana?
Actually, Diana, sorry, I do have a question. Going back to the original section 812E designation of RCA on plans and plats, the purpose of this is to establish that at time of master subdivision that we want to have RCA described by meets and bounds that can later then be shown on the final plat. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
The master subdivision final plat is the ones where you are lotting lots, and you would show, if there's RCA on that section, you would show the meets and bounds. It's already required because it's on the application.
Okay.
It's already required.
I'm just.
You're already doing it.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering, like.
Not already doing it?
Well, I was kind of going to echo, like, on the master subdivision, we come in and it might be a hatch pattern, and then you go through construction drawings and things kind of move around.
No, this is the final plat. This
Well,
is
that's why
you already built the
doesn't
roads
read
and you
that
built
way.
the sewer.
But it says master subdivision,
Final plat.
but it says master subdivision plan and plat.
That's right.
So it's a-
It was confusing to me, that's all. It's nomenclature.
The only reference I see, okay.
Read it at number 1, right there. It says
Number
master
1.
subdivision plan and plats.
It should say final plat.
The very top would be in number 1.
Keep going up higher.
8.1.2.
Oh, I understand, but if you read the sentence, it says the final plat.
Well, sure. It's just the first sentence was confusing to me, because we usually just show a hatch pattern until we
Yeah.
get to the final plat where
That's
we
right.
nail it
The
down.
RCA shall be shown in the master subdivision plan as separate lot or lots from individual residential or non-residential building lots, period. The RCA with meets and bounds description shall be shown on the final plat to be preserved in perpetuity.
They didn't make the change to the
There's a
first.
period, so.
Sorry.
Oh, the period. The period.
You gotta use bigger period.
I got you,
Thank
though.
you.
I
No, I
got, I hear
appreciate
what
the
you're saying. We're
clarification.
not
We're
trying to,
good.
we're not trying to
We're
get
good.
meets and bounds there early. We don't want it there
Okay,
early.
thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Anybody else? Possible motion to approve the 4 amendments?
I'll make a motion that we approve the 4 amendments as presented with the understanding that amendment number 2 related to cross-access will be subject to discussion between Mr. Roach and the department?
He was an individual when he brought that up.
Oh, you're the public too.
Public.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. So I have a motion with comment, second?
Second.
Second by Mark. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Super.
I just need one final motion to
So move.
We got a motion,
Second.
second by Reggie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned. Well done, guys.
And we didn't need a bio break.
Thank you, sir.
Well, we needed it.
We needed it, but we didn't take it.
No, we've been here a little second.
Mr. Stewart was the first,
Yes, I was the first. The one that we did right.
Have you, I gotta go to a Bible study, but I'll show you.
Night all.
But,
Night.
night. Have you heard what I'm going on?
Yeah.
So, has he picked somebody to go in my place?
Shutting down.
I see no women up here anymore. What's happened? Are they all gone? So who do I?
Call Mayor.
Okay, because I wanted to tell you, because
I don't have any control.
I know you, but you can at least be another person. This woman is top-notch, been around for 25 years. She lives in our neighborhood. She lives down in the cul-de-sac. Angela, I can't remember her last name. When you
Call Mayor. Just say, I'm coming off, so we're.
Okay, I'll do that. But I want you to, oh, my phone died. I can't show it to you. I'll show it, I'll see you on the street.
But you'll be here on December.
Yes.
Okay, because you get your plaque.
Oh, yes.
You get recognized. You gotta get pictures.
Oh, gosh, that's awful. I cannot stand these.
I get what you guys are getting upset about.
All those lawyers. All those crazy lawyers.
It does get down to the commas and periods and order, and it does.
I have a team call tomorrow at 10 with Russell and Amanda.
So
Zeno Road.
Mine is, yeah. Hers, yeah, it's pretty clear.
Amanda was just.
I'm gonna send you an email and ask for all the language of Word document, language for the, and then I'll forward Russell and Amanda.
Florida's kind of odd because you got the house, you got the four.
That's fine.
So Dad has his house. That's how I got my house. They're on the same piece of property.
So you need her to send it
And
to you.
together we carry the umbrella.
Amanda, send it to me.
He loves
So you would like the.
always
Word
has,
version?
so
Yeah.
it works right now.
It works.
As long as he's around, but, you know, I sort of look at it as
It's
I'd
already
rather
been
use something.
advertised is the thing. It's always been emailed.
Okay, good, but.
I'll do what I can in the morning. I mean, I just appreciate you guys listening.
I don't think it's that hard. It's one of those things that we have to say there can be an exception based on public works and transportation director or whatever.
I mean, you guys should
We
have.
just have to have a couple standards for how to.
My biggest concern is those
I agree with you.
the neighbors side by side that are upset with each other, those are going to be really, really hard. Here's a great example for you. Jody Katz. Play fine. In my animal hospital. He doesn't have a neighbor next door that didn't want them.
So didn't we make you guys do it anyway?
We did. We have a choice.
But the reason is because someday that property will be sold and then people will be happy to have done away with it.
No, like I said, I totally agree with processes. I think it makes for better projects. You just have to be careful that you're forcing somebody to a private individual to not be able to work. That's my concern. If I get two people next door that have been feuding for 50
Well, and
years.
that's one of the things that I didn't feel like it should be me because Russell's not my employee. That's why it's not the plan director with the exceptions, but